I'm Catherine Arndt, the Chief of the VLGA Connect Studio. Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the VLGA, your counsellor support network and the national broadcaster on all things local government.
Hi everyone, welcome once again to TGU, the flagship VLGA Connect weekly panel discussion, where I'm joined by Tony Rownick from Hunt & Hunt Lawyers and Julie Reid from Julie A. Reid and Associates, let me get that right, to discuss the events of the week. Hello Tony, hello Julie.
Hey Chris, hey Julie, another week, another month, and off we go again with lots of news.
I know. It is like that, isn't it? When I saw the list this morning and I just going through it, I was like going, wow, there's just so much to talk about in local government. There's never a dull moment. And, let's get on with it, guys.
Yes, indeed. And thank you to You Know Who You Are for the text this morning. I've added another story to the bottom of the list that you might not have seen. I had used it on the roundup, but Jeremy Clarkson's back in the news, having trouble with his local council. So we might get to that before the end of the show today. But the big news in town this week and across the state has been the Victorian state budget, and the sector bodies and some of the councils have not been backward in coming forward to give their verdict on the budget. I think, Tony and Julie, the overall theme is a bit disappointing. Probably as expected. There were plenty of hints coming out about projects being delayed, like Airport Rail Link, pushed back for 4 years, and the Mayor of Moonee Valley had something to say about that. At all surprised by this tightening of the reins with this budget? Julie, I'll start with you.
Yeah, look, I was disappointed generally for local government. I thought some of the things, though, that were good news, if we can start by that, in saying that at least we've seen some money come forward, $302 million for Victorian councils for natural disasters rebuild, which is really great to see, especially because of what we experienced, particularly in the last 12 months. We've seen $18 million assigned for community sport infrastructure, which is good. Probably not enough, but we're not going to balk at that. We're going to say, okay, thank you very much. The one thing, Chris, that I'm excited about is school crossing supervisor funding. 2 years of funding for school crossing supervisors. So I think we can thank Strathbogie for that. I really do. So well done, Strathbogie, for holding the line on that one, and hopefully the others, the councils have got behind you and supported that one, and that's great news for me. I thought it was really good, the fact that they're looking at strengthening the VBA, the Victorian Building Authority, the inspectors and auditors by 50%. I thought that was a really, really strong message that they are committed to helping in that building space. So I was pretty happy about that. I think there will be some knock-on benefits for local government in that. Lots to be concerned about. I was a little bit concerned about the cut to the Growing Suburbs Fund. That was cut by $5 million, and that's actually a 90% cut in the last 2 years, and it was spelled out by MAV, I think, that was the case. So very, very concerned about that as well, in terms of, assistance for the suburbs. And I've got some comments to make about the airport rail link, but maybe you might want to save that.
All right, we'll come
out of you.
we'll come back to that. And you talk about the Growing Suburbs Fund. There's been some talk recently, of course, of, I think, that sort of being wound back, that growth areas infrastructure contribution to be replaced with a more broader fund. I'm not sure we had much detail on that, Tony, in this budget, but certainly a lot of projects look to be, at least if not up in the air, delayed.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think that Growing Suburbs Fund is now only $5 million after these cuts. But look, I think not a surprise. You understand that the state budget's in a very precarious financial position. We've got a daily interest rate cost, I think, forecast of $25 million per day in 2027. That's a local council swimming pool. a
Yeah.
day, if you like. Think of it like that
I
potentially.
think you'd be lucky to get a swimming pool for $25 million these days.
Yeah,
wouldn't you?
probably right. Maybe
Definitely a lot more than that nowadays.
It's probably more expensive now than when I started talking at the rate things are going up. But you know, our AA credit rating's under threat. We know that we've got, you know, this, you know, record government debt. Is it 188 billion, you know, with a B, billion. So you understand that that there's a need for the government to be more cautious and careful, and there's going to be less money to go around. Some would say, well, you know, the government's caused some of their own pain there with, you know, decisions like going into the Commonwealth Games and then pulling out that have been at a cost. You know, the huge lockdown, bigger than anywhere in the world in Melbourne, and the costs that we had as a result of that. But nonetheless, I think we all expected that there would be less sort of largesse in the state budget this time around. And so just generally across the sector, the peak bodies from the, you know, MAV, regional cities Victoria, rural councils Victoria, etc., have generally, the theme has been disappointed, as Julie said. Regional cities Vic were disappointed that the Regional Jobs and Infrastructure Fund hasn't been reinstated. Mary Ann Brown, who's of course a councillor and president of Rural Councils Vic, has said, you know, the budget's left a big gap for councils to fill, particularly in the provision of community services. And I think at a regional level, we're seeing a lot of that with you know, G21's come out and said slim pickings for Geelong. I think Moonee Valley Council's come out in relation to Airport Rail. And across the board, there are a number of like transport projects, new education facilities, redevelopment of schools, kindergartens, health facilities that have been put back. They haven't necessarily been cancelled, but they've been put back for months or years, given the difficult financial position we're in. And I think that that's a prudent approach from the state government, but there understandably is going to be disappointment through the local government sector.
So that's a good summary, Tony. And there's been some individual councils having something to say too, which people can follow up on if they want to see what East Gippsland thinks, what Banyule and Baw Baw have put out some statements this week as well. Two I might focus on. Marybeck has jumped on reports that a level crossing removal project there is going to be delayed, and they've called for some action to I think prepare for that eventuality and to make the transport infrastructure there more usable for people in the short term. They're looking for some immediate changes there from the government.
That'd be
and the Moonee Valley Mayor,
line, I think. The
yes,
upfield line.
correct,
Yeah.
yes, the upfield line. So there's a statement came out, I think, yesterday from Marybeck Council on that, and we'll get to Julie's thoughts on Airport Rail Link. It's been pushed back a further 4 years. Now, the Treasurer says that's because of this situation with the airport that want an underground station. As you may know, that's going to mediation. The mediator's been appointed to try and work out something there. There was a suggestion this week that if they don't sort that out quickly, it might become an opportunity for Avalon to see further development and a link. That would be interesting to see. But the Mayor of Moonee Valley, Piers Tyson, says he's going to fight this 4-year delay. He's written to the shareholders of the airport, and he's saying this is just not good enough. It needs to happen sooner, particularly for that part of Melbourne, but for all of the connectivity across Melbourne. Julie, I know you want to say something about the airport rail link.
Yeah, and I was going to say exactly what you've just said, Chris.
Oh, sorry, I've stolen your thunder.
But also, if I could just add to that by saying that, you know, obviously Mayor Tyson is really concerned about the residents who live in Keilor East and Airport West to have access across to the west, the north and the CBD. So it's not just about the airport, although really critical. I mean, we are the largest city now in Australia, and we do not have an airport link. It is just crazy. And, you know, we've got a significant population around there that need access to good, reliable public transport. And that's the point that he's making here. Another 4-year delay is certainly not welcomed by Moonee Valley. And I can understand why, you know, from that perspective. You know, we're talking about an airport here that has private investors, private shareholders. They're making a whole lot of money at the moment from car parking. You know, they've got to resolve this. This has to be the mediator, which is great, has been appointed. I know that the Melbourne community want to see some action in this space and want to see an airport link. We are so far behind major cities. So, so good on Mayor Tyson for raising this again this week and making it really clear and writing to the shareholders at Melbourne Airport.
I haven't seen anything from Brimbank Council yet, but I'm sure they'll have some views on what this may or may not mean for the Sunshine Transport Precinct, because of course that's all intrinsically linked with Airport Rail Link and what happens at the Sunshine Station. So I imagine they'll have something to say. Tony, any more on the budget before we move on, perhaps?
No, look, I just echo what Julie said about airports. Have a think, folks, you know, international cities that you fly into, you know, you almost always have an airport at the terminal, frankly, and it'll take you straight to the CBD. And we are an international city now, Melbourne, and only forecast to grow more. I think we've outgrown Sydney or are about to in terms of population size. It is, as Julie points out, it's just a huge anomaly that we don't have this. It hasn't, and to be fair to the government, you know, it hasn't been in any government's long-term planning. It ought to have been there, you know, in the planning 50 years ago. It's but you know, each delay sort of certainly impacts on, you know, the reputation and the functionality of Melbourne, particularly from that tourist international traveller perspective.
Yeah, I would agree, Tony. Yep.
Couldn't agree more, Tony. A victim of the short-termism that we see so often in the political system here in this country. So lots more to talk about. So let's move on. As we said, all the peak bodies have had something to say. Lots of councils are putting out statements about the budget. We'll try and put a list of those up so that you can follow through. I saw this as a headline, and it's not far from the truth. Another week, another monitor in Victoria. We've had the announcement this week of a municipal monitor for Bullock Shire. I must admit, this one wasn't quite on my radar, perhaps as the next candidate for a municipal monitor. There's some others that I thought might have been slightly ahead. I see Tony nodding. But anyway, when you look at the terms of reference, there's a bit more detail on why this has occurred, some recommendations from the Chief Municipal Inspector. And what a great choice for a municipal monitor, if I may say. They've tapped Peter Harriott, who's just recently finished as a long-term CEO at Greater Shepparton, who's going in there until the end of the year as the monitor. Thoughts, folks?
And it's interesting that this time they've just chosen one, because there's been two monitors going in.
Yeah, good point.
However, Bullock is a very small council, so whether they felt that that was enough, and the significant experience that Peter Harriott has to offer, you know, maybe has been enough. I don't know, but it's interesting going.
But also maybe, Julie,
not following that pattern religiously.
I may be off base here because, you know, people have been speculating about what other councils might have monitors. And we've talked before about where are the monitors going to come from. And we know they're building a panel, which I think was meant to be for the 4 years of the next council term. Maybe it's a sign that there's some more monitors needed and we're not going to be able to find enough to put two at each council.
Well, I've heard on the grapevine that those that have applied have now been contacted, and been confirmed whether they're going to be on the list or not. So that's what I've heard. So I'm assuming now that there is a list that is in place.
There's some scuttlebutt fresh from Julie. Tony, were you surprised to see this appointment?
Yeah, so I was surprised. I hadn't heard of particular issues at Bullock that would suggest that a monitor might be appointed, but we don't know. Perhaps there's perhaps the mayor or a councillor has requested the same, as written to the minister. We don't know. Looking at the terms of reference, there's no real sort of hints as to a particular problem. They're the standard sort of governance terms of reference around, council law interactions amongst themselves with staff, etc. There's some things there about meeting procedures and decision making and attendances at meetings. So perhaps I might be reading something more there. Adequacy of the governance rules, but I guess we'll see that unfold. But as you say, there's dysfunction at other councils that is hitting the media and our attention a little more. And it would appear that the government, to date at least, has felt that those councils aren't worthy of intervention and yet below peers. But as you say, Peter Harriott understands regional Victoria very, very well and had long experience as a CEO and in other roles across the state. So I think it'd be a very good appointment. And the notion of the monitor serving beyond the election to the end of the calendar year again, I think that's a really good sense of continuity. If we have a change of councillors, we have a monitor who has some context still there to assist in, I guess, inducting those new councillors and that new administration.
It also
makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, it also introduces those new councils to the concept of monitors and what they're there for, and that the fact is that there will be intervention, and the government is serious about intervention if things are not working well, if good governance isn't in the forefront of their minds, etc. So I think it's really sends a really strong message up front, which I think is, I agree with that. I think that's really good.
Okay, perhaps just one other thing to note here. There's a line in the terms of reference that was not, interestingly, in the minister's statement, unless I missed it, and that is that this has come about based on confidential advice from the Chief Municipal Inspector about councillor conduct, financial management practices, and organisational capability at the council. So there's just that one line there in the terms of reference that wasn't really picked up in the minister's statement to suggest why they've decided at this point in time Bullock could benefit from having a municipal monitor. Okay, moving on. It's been a big week of news at the CEO level. As you know, we like to keep an eye on that. Moyne Shire has announced its new CEO this week. Mark Everstein will, as far as I'm aware, be new to local government when he takes up this role. He's got a lot of business experience, currently with a company called Americold Logistics, and I gather from reading the statements that it's his business acumen that's really impressed the councillors there, and that's what they want to see brought to bear on their council going forward. Thoughts on this appointment?
Interesting, Chris. He's an accountant by trade, so and has led a number of successful companies across the globe. So he's very, very business orientated. So a really interesting choice. I wonder whether that sends a message to us about, the financial sustainability challenges around, the council. I'm not too sure, but, an interesting choice by the council. There is a link back to the local community, though. I believe that Mark has said in the statement that I think his wife or his partner comes from that area, and so they're returning back to that area for her and the family to be there. So obviously wanting to come back for personal reasons as well, and really excited about being part of the Moyne Shire community. And what a beautiful place it is down there, really. Why would you not want to go back to a place like that if you come from there? It's just one of those places that you're probably likely to return. But yeah, look, an interesting choice. I think that it'll be interesting to see, how Mark finds stepping into the complex environment of local government where there's over 100 services. We're not just talking about a logistics company here. We're talking about over 100 services. And this is where it becomes, a challenge stepping into that kind of environment and understanding, getting across it. But look, there's some great CEOs down in that region that will no doubt be providing Mark with support as he steps into the role. as part of the region.
Yes, good point there, Julie. So, Moyne has got some attention in recent times for some of the innovations that they're doing. It came up again last night on the Global Executive Panel that the VLGA and LGRU ran about affordable housing and the key worker projects they've done down there. I'm imagining the councillors want to see that innovative business approach to solving problems be brought to bear in their patch. Tony?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the Mayor Councillor Ian Smith, in his statement, really did highlight the business management experience. It seems to have been the really meaningful factor for councillors, and look, it's about getting the best out of his people, his employees, and I suppose that's very much a transferable skill. But as Julie says, it's a different space to what he's been operating in. So it'll be a steep learning curve, but the council has certainly embraced the skill set that he brings in. So that's a real positivity. They obviously see some real applications within Moyne down there, Port Fairy, etc. for that skill set. And as you say, they're already seem to have a fairly entrepreneurial, innovative bent down there. And this would sort of meet with that.
The other thing, Chris, I think that's happening down there is there's a lot of business happening down there in wind farming, and that's caused the council quite some concern about the level of wind farms that have been established down there. Having a business person, a really solid business person at the table, dealing with other business people and understanding the language and, understanding, sort of how you can work effectively with them, might be of benefit as well to Moyne.
Yeah, good point. And of course, Mark's very welcome to join the local government family, and I'm sure he'll receive a lot of support, as Julie said, from around the region and beyond. We look forward to meeting him at some point after he takes up the reins. A couple of other quick CEO notes. Craig Neiman, who quite recently left Greater Bendigo after 16 years at the helm there, has been announced this week as the interim CEO at Glenelg for an 8-week period. So they already had an interim, Greg Wood, whose term is coming up for conclusion very soon. Craig's going to step in for 8 weeks, and the mayor there has said that their process to recruit an ongoing CEO is still underway. So they need a little bit more time by the sounds of that, but certainly a safe pair of hands going in there at Glenelg in Craig Neiman. And Kathy Henderson has been reappointed at Marybeck City Council for a new term. Congratulations to Kathy, a 5-year term that starts in December. This is quite mind-boggling when you think about the numbers here. That means that effectively her term has been extended through to December 2029. Doesn't that just feel like some way far in the future magical date? 2029.
And these years just tick over so quickly, but Kathy really deserves this. I will say she's an extraordinary CEO and doing an amazing job at Marybeck. So, and great to see that they've got full confidence in Kathy being there for a number of years.
Yes, well, that'll make 10 if she sees that out. That'll make 10 years, which is a great stint for a council CEO. Well done, Kathy.
Yeah.
So that's the CEO news. I might just jump to Queensland just for a moment because there's a Victorian connection here. Townsville this week has appointed an interim CEO. I think we might have reported that their CEO, Prince Ralston, was one of a handful that have resigned since the elections in March in Queensland. The interim CEO is a man by the name of Joe McCabe. He was at Gold Coast City Council for 28 years in a couple of stints in senior roles. He's recently been interim CEO at, I think, Alice Springs and doing some consulting up at Darwin. But the Victorian connection is he was for about 5 years the Director of Corporate Services at the City of Whittlesea back in the late 90s. And I think your paths may have crossed, Tony.
Yes. So I was on council next door at Nillumbik when he was Corporate Services Director at Whittlesea, Joe McCabe. So well done. And he's built a really long and esteemed sort of career in local government, taking very senior roles in a huge council. Gold Coast, enormous, one of the biggest councils in the country. And I think he'll fit in well in that Townsville environment, in that acting role, presumably while they're looking for a more
Yeah.
permanent replacement.
Couple of names come to mind when you think about executives in Victoria that have gone on to other states and forged long, successful careers. Joe's obviously one. Ray Burton's another one that comes to mind. Tim Jackson, who was over at Playford and Cooper Pedy more recently, is another that have had, part of their origins in local government in Victoria. So, I think we breed them well here.
David Turnbull as well went to New South Wales, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Hmm.
So there you go. But we're digressing. Let's go back to the story list here. A couple of waste-related stories that caught my eye
Oh,
this week. And a bit of a beat up, you've got to say, some of this.
oh,
Maybe the Knox one, though, has got a bit of attention. So Knox is doing fortnightly waste collection instead of weekly. That's come under attack, even from within. One councillor there's pushing pretty hard to have that schedule changed, but the mayor says it's actually been received well by a lot of residents. And, this is part of the decisions that councils are needing to make about waste collection as we bring in these new collections over time that have been mandated by the state.
that's right, Chris. And it's interesting because I think when this councillor was on the news and was saying that he was anti the decision, and obviously he was in the minority, also mentioned that the election was coming up later this year.
Mm.
So, I think that these types of things are starting to become election platforms.
Yeah.
Candidates, Tony would know this. Tony, I'm sure you've got a view about this kind of stuff, but this is what starts to happen around about this time up until the election. These controversial, so-called controversial issues come out of the woodwork, and they get a lot of gravitas with the community because, as we know, waste is up there with the top three, matters that are most important to our communities,
Mm.
and are what councils get assessed against. If the waste pickup, if you get that right, then you're a good council. If you don't get it right, then you're not a good council, and that's the dynamic environment in which councils work within. I thought this was an interesting take. I think overall we're going to be talking a lot more, I think, Chris, about the waste space over the next probably 12 months.
I think that's right. Yeah.
What's going to happen with,
There's been some attention given
charges.
also to the way waste charges are calculated. A
Yeah.
couple of councils under the microscope there too.
Yeah.
That's certainly playing out at the moment. Tony, your reaction to this?
Yeah, so perhaps just tell the viewers what's going on there. In mid 2023, Knox Council ditched the weekly general rubbish collection service.
Mm.
And when we're talking about the rubbish that is non-recyclable,
Yeah.
not garden waste, that general service, which used to be weekly, now is fortnightly. And that's a trend that's across the sector. We see that in Manningham, Boroondara, Monash, and Glen Ira.
Yeah, good point.
metro
They're not
areas.
the only council to be
That's
doing
right.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, and the argument against is that, look, it's not frequent enough for some households. We fill up our bin prior to that fortnightly collection. It is possible though for Knox residents to get an extra bin, so for more volume, given the change in frequency of collection. And for normally that's at an additional cost, which user pays. I get that, but then for those households that have a particular need, there might be young children in nappies, etc. There are mechanisms to get that additional bin for free. This Councillor Darren Pearce, who has come out in the media very critical of this, is sort of leading the charge. I agree with Julie that I think it's a case of garnering some easy votes for the election cycle. Look, I think this is a difficult space for people because, as Julie says, there's an expectation. No one likes to lose something, that they've got used to. So you're used to it being every week, that service changing to fortnightly, but clearly there has to be some sort of behavioural change affected across households because of the cost of landfill, and the decreasing difficulty we're having. And we only seen from the recent state budget, which has increased the costs, people accessing those municipal landfill sites, that it's only going to get worse. So I've worked with the NOx, waste collection services team, I think led by a guy called Nick Dunstan. They're a great team, and this is a case of a council understanding what's going on out there in the economy, and trying to find a way to make do with the money that councils get through rates as well. And I think it's a fair system that if I generate more waste, then perhaps I should pay a little more to have greater volume in my bin. Although I understand if for some particular inherent family need, it's not just me throwing more things out, it's the fact that I've got young children in nappies, or there's something in my household that means I have to generate more waste, or medical waste, or stuff like. I'm trying to think of examples. So I think that this is reasonable, but I would be frustrating, I imagine, for the majority of councillors at Knox who would have thought, we've just got to live with this. We'd much prefer bins being collected more frequently, but we understand the limitations of our budget to now have one councillor sort of going rogue, if you like, after a decision. I believe he might have supported the original decision. Now to be saying, I'm going to be the first out there calling to wind this back, knowing that I'll probably pick up some easy votes.
Yeah.
Tony,
Okay.
you interestingly talk about this behavioural change, which I know that a lot of the waste teams across all of the councils are working really hard on that behavioural change. And we've seen an example which has happened up at Yarra Ranges just recently of the use of little messages being put on the bins.
Red and green tags.
One of them with a smiley face and one of them with a sad face, saying, whether or not you've recycled well, or whether you need to improve in recycling. And it's not gone down well, has it, Chris?
Well, there's been a little bit. This is the one I was saying I think's a bit of a beat up. There's been a bit of media coverage on this. Somebody said this is akin to public shaming, but when you read down the story, Yarra Ranges have been doing this for 8 years.
I know.
This program's been around for 8 years, and I assume it's helping with that behavioural change exercise that you're talking about, Julie.
That's what I agree with it, because I think I don't think. I mean, I wouldn't be looking at my bins next door to see whether they have something on there that's a smiley face or a sad face or whatever. I'd only be concerned about my own bins, frankly. So, I think this is a beat up. But there's obviously some people out there that are, a few people that are thinking it's some kind of shaming mechanism. It's not. It's about behavioural change. It's about getting people to do the right thing, so then we can minimise the cost of this service, which has then a flow-on effect for them. So benefits to the community overall.
Yeah, if you're not told that you're doing it wrong, then chances are you think you put the right things in the bin and you don't realise. We've all driven on a road, and we've seen those smiley face, happy face, sad face when you're driven over the speed limit, for example. These are good tools. To me, I see this as educational, frankly. And if I got one of these on my bin, I'd think, wow, what have I put in the bin that was wrong? I'd hope that there was a way that they either follow, you can find out what it is you did wrong. But I guess there's probably some sort of helpline or some sort of way you can contact council and get more detail. I'm sure it's on the website, and you'd go and read that and perhaps realise what was in the bin that oughtn't have been in this time around. So to me, you'd expect that in a street where this is occurring, over time we'll see more and more green smiley faces as people learn.
And Chris and Tony, I could only expect that gentlemen of your calibre would only have smiley green faces, and you would only ever have smiley faces when you're driving to your,
Oh, absolutely.
homes,
Absolutely.
or, off on holiday somewhere.
Well, we're recycling Nazis in our house. I get the magnifying glass out to look at the little symbol all the time to make sure I'm doing the right thing. We don't. I'm in Greater Geelong. We don't actually have the glass collection or the FOGO yet. I'm not sure what the timeline for that is, but I can imagine that it will get a bit more confusing as those extra collections are coming in. And I see somewhere overseas, and I haven't got it to hand, a council has announced a recycling simplification process, which I think is a bit of a step back from some of these additional responsibilities that people have perhaps struggled with. But I think we've all been talking rubbish for long enough, and we should move
Not
on.
unusual.
I've got lots more on the list. Perhaps just a quick comment on this one. I noticed that Surf Coast Shire has resolved to advocate for some local wetlands to be closed to duck hunting. Some people who obviously participate or support in duck hunting have objected to that. They're raising a petition and they're trying to get the council to reverse its decision.
Yeah, what struck me here, Chris and Julie, though, was that the duck hunting was within 250 metres of residences. So duck hunting is currently legal in Victoria in certain places. So it's a legal activity. We're talking about Brown Swamp, Lake Garang, and Lake Modawarri, I think is how you pronounce it there.
Modawarri, yep.
Yeah. And Councillor Kate Gazzard at Surf Coast, who moved the motion, cited, concerns with native wildlife being injured or killed, but also this proximity to residential houses. And what occurs to me is, like you, Chris, I'm not a duck hunter, never was, but I grew up in regional Victoria. I know that the best time for people to go and shoot ducks is in about half an hour before sunrise. So it's early morning. And I'm just thinking, I'm not sure I'd want to be awoken by the sound of guns, 250 metres from my house.
No, I wouldn't.
Yeah, in the early morning. So I get that. But Geelong Field and Game said, we need community consultation here. Maybe there are some people in the vicinity who don't mind that noise. But I'd be surprised if the majority of people thought certainly the noise of a gun would carry 250 metres typically. Yeah.
Well, normally issues come from resident concerns anyway. They come from concerns and then they filter through to the council and then the council responds, So I suspect there's probably a bit of a groundswell of opposition and that's why they've gone down this route.
Yes, you're right, Julie. That is how it generally works. Spot on. All right, so that one was reported in the Times in the Surf Coast this week. This is a big story, and we might not have time to do this justice, but it's getting a lot of attention. I monitor news feeds all the time, and I reckon nearly 50% of it the last 2 days has been Cumberland City Council's ban on same-sex parenting books from its libraries. They made that decision in a very narrow council vote earlier in the week. It's prompted a lot of backlash and condemnation. There's a petition that's attracted, it's probably gone way past it now, 10,000 signatures in the first 24 hours. The New South Wales government is saying they're reviewing the funding of Cumberland Council's libraries because of this decision. It's even created a bit of a war between the Cumberland Councillor and the Mayor of Inner West because of comments that have been made about that inner Sydney community. This is quite an extraordinary story that I think's got a bit of a way to go yet, Tony.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, as you say, it's probably the big national local government story this week. I think we're going to look at this, put our ideologies aside and look at this. The actual motion, which I thought was a very broad motion, says that council take immediate action to rid same-sex parents' books or materials from council's library services. So really broad motion. So, there's been comments about sexualizing children, and I think my personal view would be, you wouldn't want graphic sexual images in the toddler section, but we're not talking about that here. We're simply talking about a book that talks about, having two dads, two mums, or that sort of that sort of storyline. So it's a very conservative area of Western Sydney, Cumberland Shire. Councillor Steve Christou, who's a former mayor, has has said he's been contacted by distraught parents about books in the toddler section. I've seen comments about, you should never, ever censor what books are in the library. My view is, I think it's reasonable for us to say we wouldn't want, images of graphic violence, of pornography, of, horror stories and all that in the young children's section, because that would obviously,
Clearly inappropriate.
Troubling.
Yeah.
But what we're talking about here, and I've seen an image of the book. It's a picture of, two adult dads and a child. I really think that we have to not focus on the ideology here, but the facts. And I think there's a place for censorship occasionally where it will cause hurt and damage for someone, but this one seems to be a strange decision to my mind, and I'm not surprised that it's drawn a lot.
As many others have said. The councillor concerned, Steve Christo, has admitted this week through some media appearances that he hasn't actually seen the book. And when asked about the number of complaints, it was, I think, about 5. Someone suggested, was it like 200? No, 5 people approached him, apparently. Not about the number, of course. It should always be about the weight of the argument, shouldn't it?
Yeah,
Not
absolutely.
necessarily the number. Julie, your take?
Oh, just the whole issue of inclusivity is what's weighing on my mind. And I don't agree with where the council's gone with this. But again, I'm bringing my personal lens to this because I just disagree. I think that, children need to grow up in an inclusive environment, and this book seems to me to be an inclusive kind of read, which I think is really important for children growing up in a society now that is very, very different, to what it was a long time ago, So, and we as councils now are told, and, we've got to deliver services that are inclusive. Inclusive services is what councils need to deliver on, and this is part of that. And I disagree, and I can understand why there is a lot of press around it, because we saw what happened with the drag queens. We saw what happened with anything of that sort of nature where it's around inclusivity, where we have a lot of people that just are not in that space, and push back on these kinds of things. It's very distressing, I'm sure, for a lot of people in the community.
Yeah. I think they're different issues to me, the drag queen stuff, because I think there's a lot of ideology in that debate about the drag queen story time. I think what the children really want's probably disappeared from that whole conversation. I think both sides of that argument are kind of using the children as a sort of bringing attention to a particular ideological position. But here clearly, this notion that children might read a book that represents two same-sex parents is to me, it's the world. Now, if it was a book with graphic images in it, whether that was heterosexual or homosexual or whatever, we wouldn't want that for our children, would we? But it would be reasonable for that to be published for adults to read in certain environments. But so I think that there's some of the the jump on this, people have lost what they're trying to protect here. I mean, what are they trying to protect children from, other than just something that they're going to be seeing in their own schools, in their own kindergartens, in their preschools, in their environments, where there clearly are a variety of households now, single parents, same sex, the whole range. And it's only reasonable that children see that, and that people from those environments feel that they're a part of the story as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and look, we know that the teachers across this education system are battling bullying, in a serious way, and so, this is where it starts to, when there's no acceptance of, a different kind of arrangement in a family, or inclusivity in a different way, then this is where the bullying starts, and the children are impacted by those other children that haven't learnt about the importance of being inclusive. So I just we have an issue across the schools around that, which no doubt plays out because of some of these reasons.
Good discussion. I suspected that that might be where we got to, and we probably don't have enough time to do it any more justice. But I think we'll be coming back to it. The petition is coming to the Cumberland Council next week, I believe. So we'll see how they respond to that, and no doubt there'll be more to report on. I've got a lot more on the list, guys. We might get some quick fire comments because there's so much news around, always more than we've got time to deal with. About this time last week, we just finished recording TGU, and I checked my news feeds, and I was just in shock to see the early reports coming through that the mayor of one of Sydney's most populous council areas, some say most, some say second most, Blacktown, had died on the way home from a study tour, in the air apparently, on the way home from China. That's Tony Bleasdale, OAM, who was 77. Just devastating news
Very
for
sad.
Blacktown and that community. Very popular public figure by all accounts.
Very sad.
28 years, I think,
Yeah.
in the role as a councillor. That's astounding. And tributes just across the local government sector, other levels of government. He was really a well-known individual in Sydney circles, and valet to Tony Bleasdale. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about long-serving councillors, I just saw in the news this morning a long-serving councillor has died in the UK after, get this, folks, 55 years as a councillor. Just stood down a couple of years ago. 55 years as a councillor, died at the age of 83. Peter Abraham was his name, so valet there as well. Quick thought, Tony. A Sunshine Coast resident has rewritten a local law for the Sunshine Coast Council. They haven't asked her to do this. This is about tiny homes on properties on a permanent basis. The council says it contravenes state law, so they're probably unlikely to take it up.
Oh, I hope we can show the pictures to the viewers on YouTube here. This is another reason to watch this one, not listen. Because these tiny homes, I was picturing the quintessential sort of granny flat, as we used to call it, Chris and Julie, but they're pretty swish. They might be small, but they look pretty fancy, architecturally designed to me. And, we need lateral ideas to help solve the housing shortfall. We're not forcing people to have these in their backyard or indeed live in them. It's another lateral idea, part of the mix, I suppose. And apparently it would require a local law change in the Sunshine Coast to allow an additional dwelling on a title, on a lot, where and for an 800 square metre dwelling, you might get one, and for a bigger dwelling, you might get two or three of these tiny additional dwellings.
So yes, by all means, hope JLF's able to put up those pictures. They come from the Sunshine Coast News. But you've surprised me, Tony, because I thought you'd go to the precedent or the fact that a resident has taken a council's local law and rewritten it for them and then submitted it to them and said, here, change your local law.
Why not?
Maybe they're a lawyer.
Maybe. Who knows? All right. So that happened. In New Zealand, there's an MP who's still a serving councillor. We saw some of this in New South Wales not too long back, who's been saying he's going to keep doing both roles, wants to avoid a by-election, and up until last week was saying he's going to keep taking both salaries. But he's had quite a bit of pressure on him, and he's now apparently reflected and says he's going to donate his council remuneration
To charity.
To charity, yes.
Yeah,
What
nice
do we
one.
think about that?
Nice one. I think that's probably a very smart move on his behalf. But anyway, he's come under a lot of fire, obviously, and I still don't agree that should be able to be an MP and a councillor, but
Right.
we don't have that issue here. But
Well, we do in New South Wales. It's in
well,
fact, I think,
Victoria. Sorry, we don't have
yeah,
this
true.
issue in Victoria,
Mm.
but we obviously have the issue in New South Wales. But I don't agree with being able to have the power to
I
have
don't either.
both
Mm.
roles.
I think we've talked about that before, and I think Tony's in agreement
Yeah.
that you can't possibly fully commit to both of those
Yeah.
roles. I wouldn't have thought, especially a busy MP trying to then juggle also
Yeah, I know.
a part-time councillor role. A couple of councils in New Zealand, I know, have turned off public commenting on their Facebook posts, their information-only posts, because they're getting fed up with the abuse and the ridicule. So this incivility issue is global, really. We'll have a lot more to say that in the coming months. We've got a big, exciting announcement to make between the Local Government News Roundup and a collaborator in Canada. So stay tuned for that on incivility across the world of local government. But I thought that was interesting that, one CEO has said, I am not going to provide a public forum and platform for people to just attack our staff, attack our contractors, and disrespect them.
Yeah, and I haven't seen that yet in Australia. So it'd be interesting to know of any of our viewers or listeners whether or not you have done that as well, because I think it'd be interesting to know whether that's a bit of a trend that's occurring across Australia, local government as well.
Yeah, I think I can understand the motivation of CEOs, have that occupational health and safety role. I think overall it's a step backwards. I think that we would expect that our public institutions, our public officials, are subject to, community feedback and community comment. We're not sort of North Korea or China or another, form of government that wouldn't tolerate that level of feedback. But it just shows that it comes also with the level of responsibility. I think people, just like you've got a right to drive, right, freedom of movement, but you should stick to the speed limits and be careful not to, cause injury to other people. I think we need to be mindful of those things when we exercise these other rights, democratic rights, because there's a risk that we get restricted in those rights because some of us just choose to, I think, fail to consider, the welfare of others when they do it. Personally, I wouldn't like to see councils do this in Australia. I know that in the lead up to an election, comments are sometimes turned off during election
caretaker periods
to avoid electioneering. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. As you say, interesting to see if that becomes a trend elsewhere. Julie, one of your councils in the UK, North Yorkshire, has decided it's not going to put apostrophes on signs anymore. This has not gone down well, and people have been going around with texters putting the apostrophes back where they've been in the past.
I know. And Chris, how did you know that I have roots back in Yorkshire?
Oh, you've made your UK ties very clear on this program, Julie.
I didn't know that you knew about the Yorkshire tie though. So, but anyway, look, yeah, interesting to read this one. The North Yorkshire Council is going to ditch the problematic punctuation point, as it says it can affect geographical databases, and so that's their issue. The council said that all new street signs would be produced without one, regardless of previous use, and so they've produced signs with St Mary's Walk with the apostrophe normally there, without the apostrophe, and someone's come along and added it to there to make it proper.
Yeah, so it's no longer a walk named after St. Mary. It's a walk for all the St. Marys in the world.
That's right. That's right.
There should be S apostrophe then.
Yeah, well, yes, very true.
That's
yes, but
right.
no apostrophes in North Yorkshire.
Yeah, and they've even got Posty Sam that's sort of made a comment. It's worth a pop of this on our webpage, I think, just for people to have a look at it and have a read.
Yeah. Okay, there's another one for you. JLF. And finally, let's do a finally. Jeremy Clarkson, as I hinted at the top of the show, in trouble again with South Cambridge. Is it South? No, it's not. It's Oxfordshire Council. I'm getting mixed up with the council that's got the 4-day working week. He's, after his new series of Clarkson's Farm has dropped, he's been hit with a notice from West Oxfordshire District Council because of complaints that he's breaking the law using a lambing shed as a restaurant. I think they've closed the restaurant down. So he just keeps pushing the envelope with his local council, doesn't he?
And, the council have come up outrightly and said, and I will say this because I'm a planner, they've broken the local planning laws. They needed a permit to be able to operate the restaurant there, and they didn't get one. And what the council are saying is that they've got to treat them the same as everybody else. They can't treat them any differently. They've got one rule that you need to abide by, and you just can't break it because you're Jeremy Clarkson.
Well said. That might be all we need to say on that. Do you want to add anything, Tony?
I think he'll be loving the attention that his farm's getting.
Very true. and no doubt resulting in more clicks on that series of Clarkson's Farm on Amazon Prime. All right, we should wrap this up. We've had a lot to talk about this week, some great discussion on some pretty serious issues as well. A quick plug on behalf of the VLGA. The nominations for the VLGA board are now open, with all member councillors eligible to nominate for one of 2 available positions. You'll find the details on the VLGA website, or keep an eye on your inbox for more information. Now, the nominations close on the 27th of May at 5 p.m. That's a Monday. Your council must be a VLGA member by midday on the 24th of May for a councillor to be eligible to nominate. As we know, not all councils in Victoria are members of the VLGA, but there's time for you to see the light and join the association before then. So keep an eye out for details on that. I think that's all we have for this week. Final thoughts, Tony?
Oh, look, I'd say just on that VLGA point, I think the level of services that councils get from the VLGA already very high will just grow. We've seen Reece Thomas's appointment there recently, and I know there's an appetite to continue and grow the services that the VLGA provide. And here's a chance to jump on board councils because I think that will be invaluable. Following the elections, when we're really in a position where we're really wanting to get that mandatory training and ongoing training done, and VLGA is one of those organisations that's able to offer some of that assistance.
Well said, Tony. I won't ask Julie for final thoughts because I think her meter's run out and she's dropped off the feed. Are you still there, Julie?
Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you. You've just frozen, but we can hear you.
Put 20 cents in.
That's right. You wouldn't believe that, internet in suburban Melbourne would crash. Well, mine's just about to. So I'll sign off for now, Chris and Tony. Have a great week.
Thanks very much, Julie. You've frozen at a very thoughtful moment there for the viewers. All right, so that wraps up another very busy edition of TGU. Thank you for watching and listening. Have a great week, and we'll be back with more next week. Until then, bye for now.